So lovely. So yes, I shall get started today. Thank you all for joining me. My name is Michael Smith, the National Consumer Education Manager of Janome, Canada, and I'm here with you. Let me flip this around. Here with you for another edition of A to Z with Janome. And actually, maybe I'll leave that camera right there. And today's Janome HQ Instagram Live is brought to you by the letter R for the very cool ribbons and sequins foot. And you can see our fabulous Parts and Notions coordinator, Tanya Denyer, does all of these beautiful drawings. This is her RS ribbon and sequin foot. So how perfect is that? You know, as we all wonder, why do the Janome presser feet have certain letters? In this case, ribbons and sequins, it's the RS foot. So that made sense. So here's our cute little row of sequins. So it's a great foot to use. Comes available for 9mm and 7mm machines. It's not, it doesn't come with any machines. It's an optional foot. So check with your dealer. But here's my little sample using my Tamara Kate fabric for R. So ribbons and sequin foot is the RS foot for 9mm and 7mm machines. And it allows you to stitch down a variety of sizes of ribbons, or again, rows of sequins. Very beautiful. Even like there's a utility zigzag stitch, or some decorative stitches, or how about these, the play stitches. This says Stitch Sweet Love. And then again, or your rows of sequins. So how fun is that? Very quick and simple, and a good way to embellish some garments or, you know, tote bags, various projects. Now, if you don't, you're not a fan of sequins, I thought this was cool. I haven't really sewn much sequins, I must admit, since I was in college when I studied fashion design. So I only had a couple of strands of sequins in my house to do those samples. But here, there's some sequined fabric, so maybe you can stitch on your sequins this way with the fabric printed with sequins. So there I used it to stitch down just with a straight stitch, and then I used that fabric for piping. That was one of the feet we did in the past Janome HQ presentations of A to Z with Janome. Here would be my row of sequin. Oh, sorry. Here would be my row of sequins that I just stitched it down with a regular old zigzag, or again, really skinny trim as well that we can use. So it's a variety of different size trims and sequins that we can easily stitch down very quickly with our ribbons and sequins foot. Or how about stitching some elastic? So I first stitched my row of elastic onto this green fabric, so that gathered it all up, and then I stitched that to this white piece of fabric. So again, that could be like a little ruffle at like the end of a sleeve or something like that, or again, this could make a cute little Barbie skirt or something. But so yeah, so how about stitching down some elastic with your ribbons and sequins foot? That worked really well. So I'll show you how to do that. So now today I'm using the fabulous Memorycraft 15,000 quilt maker. But again, this ribbons and sequins foot is available for any of the 9mm or 7mm machines. And here is the foot. To save time, I've already strung through a strand of sequins, but here is the foot, the RS ribbons and sequins foot. And it's got this plastic guide. Yes, definitely a Barbie skirt. I agree, Tanya. Barbie needs lots of new clothes. Yes, I've got this plastic guide that's on the front of the foot. So there's various openings in the foot of how you can use this to stitch down your ribbons and your sequins. So it's very cool. Again, an optional accessory available from your dealer. Now, because I'm using a 9mm machine, I've got 9mm here. For 7mm, it would be saying accordingly. But as always, there's instructions in the blister pack. And this one, because there's so many ways to use this foot, Then inside, when you open up this cover, then there are complete instructions. I love this, like even diagrams, everything, that show you there's 4 different ways to use this foot based on 4 different sizes of trims or sequins. So how cool is that? And I loved this where it said, do not turn the screw. Because I must admit, when I first got this foot, again, years and years ago, I did that same thing. Oh, what does that screw do? And it's like, no, that screw doesn't move at all. So don't turn the screw. And again, I love how Janome thinks of everything. Do not turn the screw. But they give you, again, full instructions on how to use the foot and what sizes of trims you will use with each guide. So I remember always, I wrote myself a little cheat sheet too that I keep with the foot. What's the maximum width of ribbon is 8 to 10 millimeters is the recommended maximum. The first little guide, I'll show you all of these guides. The first one is up to 4 millimeters. So you could use even like a 2 millimeter wide little piece of trim. So I will go through. This is guide number 1. So again, that very little. So again, maybe a 2 millimeter wide, 3 millimeter wide, up to 4 millimeters will fit through that guide. The second guide is actually not really a guide at all. It's going to come up and over the foot, which then when I go to do my little elastic demo, I'll show you. So it's going to go up and over the foot like that, and then it's going to go down in between under that metal guide there, and then there's a mark right there for center needle position, so I know exactly where my needle's going to land. So this is guide number 2. It's up here. So this is my 1/4 inch wide elastic. So again, that's around 6 millimeters roughly. So that fits in perfectly there. Now, as always, I suggest take the foot like this once you order it from your dealer. If you can, if some of the craft stores near you are open, or again, I get a lot of my stuff from the Big D store that's in every town, the discount store that's in every town, and there's often a sewing and craft section, so I get a lot of my stuff there. But I would take this foot with you to the store, so then you can get your trims accordingly. Guide number 3 is actually where I have my sequins here as well. There's a little indent right above this big one. This big guide at the bottom here is guide number 4, and then right above it is guide number 3 that's slightly smaller. That will take a 7 millimeter wide trim, or this row of sequins is 7 millimeter wide, so that's why I have it in guide number 3. And then again, guide number 4 takes about 8 to 10 millimeter wide ribbon or trim. So yes, so very versatile. Now, when I'm going to stitch down my sequins, I'm going to, they are like a row of, if you imagine fish scales, do you see how they all, one overlaps the other? So it's important to feed this row of sequins through. I've got it through like guide number 3, and it's to feed it through with the fish scales going down. Or if this were fabric, you know, the nap of the fabric, how you brush it down. If this were like fur, your cat's fur, for example, your pet's fur, you want to brush it down. That'll feed through the foot easier, and it'll certainly look much better when the finished result. So I'm going to snap on my foot here, and then I'm going to go over to the sewing screen here. Okay, lovely. So now I'm using again the Memorycraft 15,000 quilt maker, and it has the sewing applications button, and a number of our machines, the Skyline S7, Skyline S9, 9400, 9450, Continental M7, 15,000 quilt maker, we all have this little house button. And then we've got our sewing applications button. Here is the t-shirt, and sewing application is basically is the machine asking us, well, what do you want to do? So here are my regular sewing applications on Wednesdays, Janome HQ, Instagram Live. I was doing some ruler quilting, and again, variable zigzag is the VZZ. But there's another little icon down here, and that is a plus presser foot. So if I select that, These are some optional presser feet, again, available from your Janome dealer. So I can select, oh, the ribbons and sequin. You love that E there. The ribbons and sequins foot. And then already the machine has set up the various widths that we can use our ribbons and sequins foot. You know, again, up to 4 millimeters. There's 5 to 6, 7, which is my row of sequins. And then again, 8 to 10. But then we can also, so those are all with various widths of zigzags, but we can certainly put down our trim with a straight stitch, or there's even a decorative stitch option too. So there's a lot of flexibility using this foot. Now, if you don't have sewing applications with your machine, again, not to fear, I will show you exactly. You can use basically any stitch you want to put down your trim. Your sequins are a little bit more special. I'm going to select the 7 millimeter one. Now I could as well adjust the width if I wanted this a little wider. Because I have a 9 millimeter wide machine, I can ultimately go from 7 millimeters all the way up to 9 if I wanted. And again, one thing I love about these machines, you never have to worry about what your settings was when you start playing around with your width and your length. Then you can just hit default. Oh, bonjour, Janome Canada. Hello. So yes, so then I'm just going to set it back to default. Now, when you again do your row of sequins, you can stitch a lot of the sequins nowadays, especially this one. This is nothing really fancy. It's just regular old plain old sequins. Then these I think are just, you know, polyester or plastic. You can stitch right through them. And if that's the effect that you want, that's perfectly fine too. There are some, the fancier ones are like glass, so you don't want to stitch through those because those can really break your needle. In this case, if I stitch over this sequence, my needle will go through it. That's not, you know, the most desired result, but it's not the end of the world either, especially if I'm using matching thread to my color of sequins. No big deal if your thread really ends up going through it. If you're using like the higher end, again, like glass sequins, those could break your needle, so you want to be careful. So again, you can adjust the width of your zigzag accordingly. So as I stitch this down, I'm definitely going to raise up my needle, and I'm definitely going to increase the width of my zigzag. I don't want them to be so close together. And then away I go. So as always, you're going to do some samples. Now you can perhaps see on the bottom of my fabric, I've got a layer of stabilizer. And as always, the stabilizer comes from, you know, everybody can recite it as always. My favorite, again, I love this so much, is the Madeira stabilizer pack. This is the starter set. So again, there's multiple different kinds of tearaway stabilizer and water-soluble stabilizer and iron-on stabilizer, so you can really select which stabilizer works best for your project. When I'm doing my little samples, I just use the cutoffs after I'm done, like my embroidery, for example. I save everything, and then this is what I use for my samples. Now, something else I do, and I'll show you in just a minute, of what I love using for these trims is, Terreal Magic is a product that you can get from your Janome dealer. It's really fantastic. I also use this for embroidery, and you spray this on your fabric and it really makes it nice and crisp. You can still stitch through it and it washes right out afterward, but it really helps stabilize your fabric without having to use an additional stabilizer like that. So depending on your application and what you're doing, there's some alternatives. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about Terreal Magic in just a second. So again, as I'm stitching my row of sequins down, very simple and easy. Again, the guide keeps my row of sequins exactly centered where I need them as they go across my needle. Now, when you do your row of sequins, and again, see way up there, that was way too close. So it's like here, they're a little bit further apart. And if it's matching thread, it's really not that objectionable at all. But what I like to do, because I'm a little anal about things, I go in with my stiletto And then this is a great project to do in front of the TV, and you just take your thread and you put it behind your sequin there, and then I'll do the same there, and you put it behind your sequined with your stiletto there. So then that way you're hiding your thread. So on this little sample there, this is my regular zigzag, and again, that looks perfectly fine. I could use some monofilament thread, so maybe you wouldn't see that at all, like that clear invisible thread, or a finer weight of thread as well. You wouldn't really see that at all. But then there, as you compare, this is the row as I stitched it, but then this is the row as I've taken the time, and it does take some time, but I've taken the time and I've tucked my stitches behind my row of sequins, so I really don't see anything at all. But as you experiment and you vary the width of your zigzag and the length of your zigzag, you're ultimately trying to aim for your stitch to go kind of right in between those rows of the sequins, right in between. So, yeah. So, yes, that it really helps. So, it's very fast, very simple to do. Or again, in a lot of these sequins nowadays, this is the decorative stitch. And yeah, my needle ended up stitching through some of the sequins. Well, fine. If that's the look that you want, that's not objectionable at all. So that looks good. So again, here's another sample of a regular zigzag. This is putting down some elastic. Or here, how about using some cute little rickrack trim? And there I could use a straight stitch or a zigzag, and I can experiment with which guide works better to line this up the way I want it. Or again, a decorative stitch. So you can really have some fun with how to do all this. Now, when I go to do my various trims, again, this is where I love using the Tutorial Magic, that you follow the instructions on the back of the Tutorial Magic package. And again, you can check with your Janome dealer that they could order it for you if they don't happen to stock it. But you can either use, trims that you buy. Again, this I just got from, again, the Big D store, so very inexpensive. So you can purchase your trim or, again, make your own. So what I do is, with a lot of my leftover fabric, then I soak it with Tutorial Magic and then press it, and it really stiffens up beautifully. So this is my little piece of fabric with no Tutorial Magic. It's just very limp and listless. It's regular fabric. But then this has been treated with Tutorial Magic, so it's got a little bit more body to it, a little bit more beef. So again, I don't need to use a stabilizer with this trim. And again, depending on what fabric you're stitching it down to, then you may not want to use any kind of additional stabilizer. So just by stabilizing your trim will help support those extra stitches. And then it's fun to use, I love using stripes like that. This is the some of Tamara Kate's fabric as well. And again, I've treated this whole piece of fabric with Tutorial Magic. And it really does not take much product to really saturate this. You could use other spray starches and spray starch alternatives, but you would have to apply, 5 times as much the amount. Whereas this, a couple of spritz of Tutorial Magic, and again, let it dry and then press it, and you're good to go. So it's really quite economical that way. So then after this is stiffened, then I cut this all apart. I cut my stripes apart. So that way you've got various trims. So on this one, now I did choose to press the raw edges into the back, so then it's completely finished off on either side. With this fabric, you could also iron on some, press on some paper-backed fusible web, so then that will help stop any raveling on the side of your fabric if you don't press it here to the back side. I find, though, by treating this fabric with Tutorial Magic, it also really reduces the raveling of the fabric. So very often when I do this, I just trim it and I leave it raw like that. That's just a raw edge. I don't worry about it, because then when I do my stitching to affix this down to my fabric, that's going to help minimize that raw edge. But it's cool, again, with stripes. I could take like this fabric, for example, and cut it apart of those lines. So then I can end up with like a really skinny trim like that has like this little rope detail on it. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with regular fabric. Or again, I found this at one of my thrift stores. You know, they're a good resource as well. Any sort of like charity shop or thrift store in your town, check them if they've got some sewing notions and stuff, again, donated. I ended up getting this whole big bag of rickrack. And again, there's a lot of people that don't even know what rickrack is these days. So I saw it and went, oh, sweet. And I think the whole bag was like 50 cents or something. So you never know where you're going to find these treasures. So when I come back here to my foot, then let me take, this like really skinny guide. And then I can feed it through this little, again, guide number 1 is for up to 4 millimeters. And then it's going to, now sometimes it is easier to feed your strips and your sequins when the foot is off, it's not attached to the foot holder. So as you thread your little piece of trim through that guide 1, then you want to tuck it down so it goes under this metal guide bar. And again, there's a little groove there for center needle position. And then you pull it through to the back. Leave yourself a little tail that you can hold on to if need be as you stitch this through. And if I'm going to, so I'm going to take my machine back to, or I'm going to take my camera back to the machine. So as I mentioned, you don't have to have sewing applications with this foot. If I go back to my regular utility, actually I'm going to do a decorative stitch. So if I'm going to go to whatever stitches I have on my machine, maybe I'll use my heirloom stitch to affix this. So I can choose whatever here that I wanted to, and again I can adjust my width. Because I'm using such a narrow trim, I would adjust accordingly. So maybe I want to make my stitching a little more narrow, and again I can always adjust the length as well. So let's give that a try. It's so fun just to experiment. Now normally I would always, lock the stitches at the beginning and end, but for time's sake I'm not going to bother. But again, you see by having it in this guide, it holds it there absolutely perfectly. So I really don't have to manipulate this at all. It's very like kind of hands-free sewing. So I'll just quickly do this. And then again, the red, I could trim this off, or I'll just like pull it through the guide. So then again, there you go. Now you choose to do decorative stitch or decorative thread, or you could use like matching thread, but it really turned out really easily. So let me show a little piece. This is a purchased trim that I'm going to use the big wide guide at the back or at the bottom, so that just slips right under the foot. So that's very easy to use. And then I'll just bring this back here. And then I hope I'm not making anyone dizzy bringing the camera back here. But again, as far as like stitches go, I could use just a regular utility straight stitch. I could use a zigzag. If you've got some fun decorative stitches, like these play stitches where again you've got like the symbols and the words, you can create a whole pattern to then stitch out. And how you do that, like in this case these umbrellas, I could stitch this whole row of umbrellas. But if I go up here to this little heart icon, this triple heart icon, and I select that, then I can select each of these stitches individually and program a whole row of stitches. So this is where I did my, I could do sweet stitch love, for example. Or let me go back and I'm going to delete that. So then I can do just sweet love. And in order to see everything, I can either scroll through with my little cursor, or I can select my magnifying glass, and then that's going to show my whole row of stitches there of whatever I have selected. So I'm going to say stitch. So stitch, sweet love. And then, again, I could adjust my width if need be. Because this is a wide ribbon, again, it's probably about maybe 9 millimeters wide. So I'm going to leave it with my 9 millimeter wide stitch. And away I go. And if the ribbon is like a little bit smaller than the actual guide, okay, then great. You can take like a little bit of time and just try to line it up a little better so it's a little more consistent. But overall, you really don't need to guide this very much and just kind of let it do its thing. So it's really, really fun to do. There's a whole different varieties you can do to decorate clothing, or again, like tote bags, or maybe labels for quilts. You want to add some different labels and embellishment. So again, whoops. So how cute is that? Stitch Sweet Love, and it's, again, stitched down perfectly. So it's a really, really fun foot to use. And I mentioned this a couple of times now. The Presser Foot Workbook is a great resource to learn how to get the most out of all your Janome, or a lot of your Janome presser feet. And then we've got separate different addendums for that Presser Foot Workbook. This one is Specialty Feet Addendum. So a lot of the feet that I've featured in the Janome HQ Instagram Lives are in this Specialty Feet Addendum. As a heads up, this Ultra Glide foot I will talk about next week, I think next Friday. So you'll see that. So again, the Presser Foot Workbook is available from your dealer as well. So make sure to check that out. Yeah, so it's a really, really fun foot. If you happen to have joined the Instagram Live late, not to worry, you can go to the Janome HQ main page, and there's the IGTV icon. So then you can review this later, or again in a day or two. I'm going to, hello, in a day or two, I'm going to be loading this as a YouTube video as well. So on the Janome HQ YouTube channel, so you can check it out that way too. So thank you all for joining me today. It's been wonderful as always. I so enjoyed this. I hope you guys do too. It's wonderful to spend time with you this way. And yes, have a wonderful weekend. And I will flip this back around to say that today's Janome HQ Instagram Live has been brought to you by the letter R for the ribbons and sequins foot. So yes, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful Father's Day weekend and enjoy the beautiful weather. And I will see you back here at Janome HQ, 1 p.m. Eastern on Monday. So take care. Bye.